This clip is Blackmagic Pocket 6K footage, so I will apply the power grade from scratch, and then we'll go into our color space transform and choose our wide gamut color space and then Pocket 6K, and then we will turn on denoising, and for our white balance we'll have to slide our temperature all the way down to maybe somewhere around here. And so this is another good example of where the lab hue adjustment can be very useful. If I turn this on and off here, you can see how much it's cleaning up the purples and blues in our shadows, and then some of the yellow and green over here. If I really zoom in, maybe on especially on things that are red, it's really pulling out the blue channel and getting rid of any purple or magenta color that's in the red. I can show that in the skin tones again here. You can see it's pulling out our blues in the hair, on his lips, on his cheek. So I'll zoom out again, and then we'll leave that on. And now I'll mess around with the contrast a bit, maybe increase that, and then we can pull back our pre-contrast slightly. I'll probably push the contrast even more. Let's go full screen and see how that looks. That's looking pretty good. We've got those nice reds once again. Our white balance feels pretty neutral. The skin tones are looking good. Probably the main thing you notice here is this lamp. We've got some clipping in the highlights. So if we check our parade, you can see the clipping there. And if I really zoom in and we disable the grade, you can see kind of the reds were clipping here, and it's starting to look very green. So if we go back to our node tree and then just make a node right after our CST, then we can go into our soft clip here, go to the green channel only, and then increase our soft clip for the green channel. And if I zoom in and toggle that on and off, you can see what that did. If we go look at our parade here, and then I Shift H to isolate the output at this point in the node tree, you can see when I turn on and off our new node here, you can see that we're matching this downward trend in the color channels from red to green to blue. And we're pulling out that extra green. So back to our main image here, I'd say this is looking pretty good. If you wanted a lower black point once again, then we can turn on our post contrast, and here's a bit of a punchier look. But overall, all the colors, hues, tonality in the image is looking pretty balanced and filmic to me. If we compare this to our Rec 709 image, you can see how much the emulation is doing, especially if I zoom in. You can see the shadows in the skin tones are really getting a lot more life and color to them, whereas previously they were very gray. We've got some slight halation here in these small reflections, even on like the telephone, and around some of the objects near the lamp. And then the red in this clock is really popping out. The reds in the telephone down here is also really popping. And if I zoom out and just size to fit, just overall the dynamic range from shadow to highlight feels a lot smoother, whereas in the default Rec 709, there's kind of too much intensity in the highlights, and not enough info in the shadows, whereas our film emulation feels very balanced from the shadows to the highlights. So let's go over and check out our print output. Once again, these are more contrasty, so I'll lower our pre-contrast a bit. And I mean, we can check out what it looks like with our linear post-contrast disabled. So here's our print look without the post-contrast. We've got those blue lifted shadows, still the warmth in the highlights. The reds are still very rich, especially in the clock. And if I minimize and turn on our post-contrast, you can see our slightly punchier version. The wood in this table is starting to look very golden. I do like that color. Overall, I'm very happy with this print look. I would say no changes. This is done. So I'll minimize that and we can move on to our next clip. So this clip is also Pocket 6K footage, so we can just copy the grade over and we'll have to warm up our white balance significantly. Let's do somewhere around there. And then maybe we'll change our tint to something right there, and we'll lower our exposure a bunch. And let's just check this out, and we can see the primary colors are looking very nice. The reds, the greens, the blues, very balanced, nice saturated look overall. Skin tones, the wood, everything feels very natural. I would say this is pretty much a finalized look. There's not too much you would need to change here. Maybe if you wanted to pull out some of the cyan in the greens or just pull back the intensity of the greens, you might try turning on the neon suppression matrix here, which if we go to our vector scope, you can see what that does. It just kind of pulls back the saturation of those greens and yellows. So if you wanted earthier tones here, then maybe that's an adjustment to do. I don't mind the bluer cyan greens. Maybe I would put this node at like 0.3 opacity, so we can see it's just doing a slight pullback on the greens there. And then from here, I'd say this is pretty much done for a print look. Let's check out the Cineon look. We can see this is much flatter. The greens definitely feel brighter here, so maybe this is something where you would want your neon suppression matrix to be back at 1. Let's see how that looks. It's definitely pulling back the harshness of the greens. It's even pulling out some of the green reflected in the skin tones too, so that's pretty nice. Let's try leaving that on, and then maybe just making some contrast changes here. Add a little bit more contrast, and then maybe we'll cool down the image just ever so slightly. And then let's look at that scaled up. I'd say this is pretty good for a finalized Cineon look. We do have our post-contrast enabled. If we turn it off, you can see here's our slightly flatter look. Let's compare this to our Rec 709 version, and you can see how much of a difference there is in the greens, especially compared to the default Rec 709 of Blackmagic. In addition to the greens, you can see the difference in the skin tone as well. We're getting more color in the shadows, and we're not really getting that plasticky quality from the Rec 709. It just overall feels more natural under the film emulation. Let's minimize that and go back to our print film to compare. We did make some changes from the Cineon, but I'll just leave the changes here on the print film, and we'll compare with the Rec 709. Once again, the greens are much less yellow here. We're also getting that nice subtractive quality to the highly saturated red, even in some of the blues here. Overall, I'd say the image has a more natural feel and is just less harsh compared to the Blackmagic default Rec 709 look. So with that clip done, let's move on to our final clip. So this last clip is GH5 footage, so we will apply our power grade from scratch again, and we'll go into our CST and change to V-Gamut and V-Log, and then we will increase our contrast a little bit here and change our white balance slightly, maybe a little bit more green and a little bit warmer. And I'll switch from the Cineon output to the print output just to help with that and seeing the color separation here. I'll warm it up a little bit more. I think actually for this one I'll also do D55, just a little warmer white point. Let's increase our post contrast, maybe just a little bit more. Lower our pre-contrast, and let's look at this. That's looking pretty good. There's still a little bit of magenta, and I'm just gonna get a little bit more green in here. There we go. That's looking pretty good. We can see we've got our halation in the waves here. We've got really nice blues happening. Let's see how it looks in the Cineon output. Definitely more green, a little bit flatter, so let's increase our contrast. I think what I'll do is actually add this even warmer white point so that we really get a warmer look. Here's how that would look in the print output as well. Just those extra warm highlights to contrast the blue waves here. I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll make a few more contrast adjustments here. Open up our shadows just a little bit more. Add some more post contrast. And then we probably need to change our grain a little bit at this point. Maybe something there. Okay, so let's just add a little bit extra here and try out just doing some primaries in this section. And so we'll pull our lift to somewhere a little bit cyan over here, and then bring some orange into our gamma. Not too much though. I think probably a slightly cooler look right there. So if I turn this off and on, just the primaries adjustment, you can see what that's doing. Just giving us a little more kind of steely green tint to our look. Maybe I'll go full screen here, and let's compare to our Rec 709. So here is our GH5 Rec 709, pretty normal balanced look, and here is our print film grade with some primary adjustments. If I go back and forth between them, you can really see how much the ocean, the blue in the ocean, is really being brought out in the print emulation. The halation on the waves is also a very nice touch. Overall, it's just giving us that iconic Dunkirk look, just that general Hollywood blockbuster look, except still staying very filmic. So let's switch to our Cineon output and then pull back some of that green. Let's just see what the primaries are doing here in the Cineon look. That's looking pretty good, so we'll leave that on. Probably we'll just increase our contrast once again, and then maybe pull back on the grain now that we've done that. and let's do a little bit more. Now let's look at this full screen, and we'll compare to our Rec 709. So even here, the emulation is bringing out a bit in the waves there. If I advance the clip, you can see when the waves are breaking, we've got some nice greens happening here, and the emulation is really helping to bring that out. You can also see the halation reacting with the waves and the highlights in the waves as I move throughout the clip here. Alright, I'd say that's pretty good for our final image. That's the last clip. We've got through all of them. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the updated film emulation. I love seeing all the incredible work you guys send me using the powergrade. If you have any questions, just leave a comment. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.